Our next guest is Royal Editor for the Daily Mirror, Russell Myers. Russell, we're both holidayed and rested. Welcome back. We have now clicked over the 1 year since the passing of the Queen and King Charles taking over. How did the Mirror pay tribute?
Well, of course. I mean, I don't think a lot of us could believe it had been a year since the Queen's passing. I think a lot of us, after the anniversary came up so swiftly, were thinking, where is the year gone? And indeed, what were the tributes being made across the country? And if you look back about that time, that really time stood still when the Queen passed away. The tributes that not only poured in throughout the country, but throughout the world leaders who came to the funeral just a few days after. It really was such a momentous time in our history, and I don't think we'll ever see the like again. Certainly, when the crowds descended on London, the floral tributes, and I think we were looking back as much as looking forward, because I think that's what the royal family were doing themselves. A two-sentence tribute from Charles, pretty succinct, I thought. But again, I think he's trying to perhaps draw a line under this transitional year, look towards the future. I think it's going to be a busy autumn for the royal family. They've got a big state visit coming up to France, and then a trip to getting out to the Commonwealth to Kenya in the autumn. So lots to look forward to for the royal family, but certainly one of reflection as well.
And a year on, there's still chatter about the events in the lead up to the Queen's death. It was reported this week that apparently Meghan had some sort of insane plan while the Queen was on her deathbed, and there was some furious correspondence apparently between Charles and Harry. Can you fill us in on that?
Well, again, I suppose in the intricacies of what was happening in that period, there was so much at play with the fact that the Queen had passed away at Balmoral in Scotland. The royal family were all spread out, trying to scramble up on planes to get to the Queen's side. Some of the royal family who did obviously manage it, and some that didn't. And interestingly enough, I think it was Harry's book really here that he set the record straight on this, and that he and Meghan wanted to fly up and be by the Queen's bedside. If you remember, the Prince of Wales had travelled with other members of his family, most notably the Wessexes and Prince Andrew, and pretty much he left Prince Harry behind. That tells you how strained the relationship was back then, and certainly it hasn't got any better. And Meghan Markle was going to go with Harry, and it was told to Harry by his father, the King, that, listen, don't bring Meghan up here. The family obviously don't want her here. That had been how relations have been very, very strained. And I don't think we've seen much improvement over the last year. And Harry cut quite a solitary figure on his own when he was at Windsor Castle paying tribute to his late grandmother. And it's a pretty sad state of affairs, I think, all round.
Yeah, it is a sad state of affairs, and I suppose that takes us on to our next story. Now, a former staffer has claimed that apparently the Sussexes didn't invite the late Queen to Lilibet's first birthday, but is that your understanding?
No, it's not, to be honest. And I think this has come from this week where we saw Paul Burrell, the former palace staffer, the footman that used to work for the Queen, and likes to spin a yarn or two. But he was saying that the Queen had invited Lilibet and obviously Harry and Meghan to a party, and that she had basically had a cake with a candle in it, and that they didn't turn up. But no, I think that when we look at what was happening at that time, and that was when Harry and Meghan were over in London for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee last year, the Queen did actually go to visit Lilibet, and the Sussexes were staying at Frogmore Cottage, which was on the grounds of Windsor Castle. And what the issue was about photographs being taken at that moment. And I don't think the Queen wanted to be photographed, especially by a professional photographer that Harry and Meghan had enlisted to come along for the day. But certainly the Queen was not about, trying to spoil anyone's fun on the day. She wanted to be a family affair. She was keen to see her great-grandchild. And I think that tells you an awful lot about the Queen, that she wasn't going to let family relations deteriorate so much, despite everything that was happening with Harry and Meghan and their want away from the royal family.
Yeah, she was always very graceful in that respect, regardless of the various bits and pieces that were going on at the time. But there's been another poll out this week again, which shows that the Brits are no fans of the Sussexes. What exactly did it find?
Well, interesting. I mean, it seems to be a different poll every week. And what happens normally with these polls is that Harry and Meghan have progressively slid further and further and further down the league table, as it were. But some headline figures I liked in this poll, it was that 61% of Brits pretty much don't want any Harry and Meghan to have any part within the royal family. I think that says they were saying that Harry should be removed completely from the line of succession. More than 2/3 believe that they shouldn't have any taxpayer funding. And that relates to the big row that was ongoing due to the Sussexes wanting the Met Police in the Scotland Yard in London to pay for their security whenever they were in the country. That remains unresolved. And I think that is a real issue for Harry when he's going to try and bring his family back over to the UK. We haven't seen Meghan and the children for quite a long time. And will they come back if this situation isn't resolved? I mean, Harry is arguing that the British taxpayer should pay for their security funding when they're here. But it's a difficult situation for Harry, and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved anytime soon.
Now, earlier we talked about this idea of transition and reflection, and the Times has given its assessment on Charles 1 year down the track, amongst other things, that he looks 10 years younger. How do you think that they've summarised his year, and what else would you add to it?
Well, I'm sure he'll be delighted at that summarisation by the Times, saying that he looks 10 years younger. I mean, listen, I think that this transitional year has obviously come to an end now. That was obviously the mood music and language being used for Buckingham Palace for so long. What are we expecting now? I mean, we've got a state visit to France coming up in a few days. I think that there will definitely be this trip to Kenya in the autumn. Charles has taken his time, I think, to get to grips with the role. I mean, on one sense, you can think that this is something that he must have been planning for decades, if not his whole life. But I think he really has been surprised with the amount of work that has gone into being the monarch behind the scenes, the amount of government papers they have to read on a daily basis. And he has taken time to get to the four corners of the UK, meeting with religious and community groups. And I think that tells you quite a lot about his character. Now, I mean, he's 75 in just a few weeks' time. Camilla is 75 as well. Will they want to be doing the huge, long tours that the royal family are known for? I'm not so sure. So I think there will be a bit of a passing of the baton in terms of doing those long tours. Maybe the Waleses will have to get involved. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh as well will be drafted in. And then, of course, Princess Anne, his trusted lieutenant. I mean, she's a remarkable workhorse. I'm sure that he'll be leaning on her for support as well. But overall, I think it's been a pretty solid year from the King, and a chance to sort of kick on now and see what we expect from him to cement his legacy, certainly over the next 2 to 5 years, I think.
And there's just one piece from the Mirror this week that I found quite interesting, and that was the announcement about the cause of death of the Queen. And apparently that wouldn't have happened if she'd passed away in England.
Well, I think it's fascinating, sort of these details that are coming out still a year later, because there was just so much information and stories to cover in those 10 to 12 days after the Queen had passed away. But because the Queen did pass away in her beloved Balmoral, her death certificate was actually published sort of as a matter of course, and that wouldn't have happened if she had died in England. I think that certain journalists would have been able, to print it as it is a public document. But interestingly enough, that cause of death of natural causes, there have been questions over the Queen's health for many years. And, luckily she was able to sleep away peacefully, at ease with the world. I think we saw some reports this week of one of the reverends who was there with her in her final days, talking about those final conversations that she'd had, very much about her father, very much about her faith, the Church of England, Church of Scotland, and also her role within the Commonwealth as well. That was very, very dear to her. And I thought a very interesting insight into the Queen's final moments as well.
Now, lastly, just before we go, Andrew's still hanging in there. Look, he attended the family memorial service for the Queen. Given it was a private memorial, do you think it was appropriate?
Well, it's a difficult situation, isn't it? And I think that if there is any creeping back into the public life for Prince Andrew, then a lot of people would find that unpalpable. But again, I think we look back to the moment of the Queen having passed away was not only the a monarch leaving this world, but also a family that was grieving as well. And we had to be particularly sensitive to that. And this was a private memorial. This is a man who has lost his mother, and the family's sort of still coming to terms with that. I think we saw from William and Kate's statement this week that we all miss you, that there was their Twitter message. And speaking to people in members of the public in Wales, where they were this week, they were saying, that the family is still coming to terms with it, I suppose, and their new roles within it. But if Prince Andrew is to try and find a way back into public life, I think that would be very foolhardy. I don't think people would appreciate it. But in terms of him, silently continuing to grieve his mother, I don't think that anyone can stand in that way.
No, I think I agree with that sentiment. Anyway, Russell Myers, thank you as always for joining us.
Thank you, my pleasure.